Hi, it's Jo and Steve from Freshagenda. And Steve, this week we're taking a bit of a look at the highlights from our latest Global Dairy Directions update that went to subscribers last week, and the latest GDT.
Yeah. So, high-level view of our outlook in one chart. Just the directions of the fundamentals. I think it's important to say the fundamentals. We're not too in prices because, we have prices fluttering all around. But, I guess supportive for skim milk powder, but they're small arrows, they're quite
not
small.
Big inclines.
No, and I think we're still seeing, while we might be seeing some tightness in supply, we're still seeing some vulnerability on the supply, on the demand side.
Sure.
And I guess a bit more uncertainty with the rise of COVID again, the second coming. Butterfat a bit mixed. We think Oceania is going to find support at lower prices. We'll talk about that later. US might go sideways. EU might go sideways. The US should weaken. Cheese is also a mixed bag. We think heavy falls in the US are probably coming, but who knows now?
Yeah.
With what might be thrown at the industry and at the consumer, but there's not an election coming. So once that's passed, anyway. Probably seeing sideways in skim milk powder, a bit more of a balancing act now with some fragility on the supply side in New Zealand, but and we think whey is going to keep coming back. So it's I guess the best way, summing it up, what's changed?
Yes.
COVID unleashed again, but much bigger this time. So we saw, as we've said before, we saw probably not a lot of change in demand when it was all added up after the event, that retail buying held it together. That pantry filling is restarted.
Yeah.
The level of lockdowns is probably going to be cautiously applied and probably not as strict as last time, so that may not be as heavy. But probably less income support thrown by governments. That's a mixed story, but I guess that'll continue to unfold as the impact in Europe in particular plays out. Our tracking of trade trends and where prices have got to would suggest there's probably some weaker affordability in Southeast Asia and both powders in particular. That's a thing to watch. And I think the bigger thing, weather's starting to affect the outlook a bit. Yeah, which is... in New Zealand, it's certainly drying out. We're going to see the La Nina impact South America in terms of crops and pastures through the summer. That's already impacting feed costs in the US in terms of corn and soy. Those prices have risen because of that issue. And we've seen European feed costs rise as well through some very mixed weather. So, those things are changing a bit, but, we've got a lot of uncertainty in the world that we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, but certainly some supply side weather impacts emerging.
Which hasn't been a problem for a while.
No, not really. But it's one to watch over the next few weeks because New Zealand's really drying out.
GDT 271. A bit of a story about, sentiment catching up.
Yeah, it's held up pretty well, the GDT auction, but down 2% in the scheme of things.
Yeah, with what's going on in the world, probably not so bad. Again, we've said that, but so look, it is again another interesting story in the detail. Worst performer was skim milk powder, as we saw, and that was a big drop in, starting demand in this event, and one of the worst average demand, in terms of bidding activity in the first 6 rounds, one of the worst we've seen. But it was held up, so I guess you got to look at the whole event, but the starting rounds were weak, but it did hold together, and a 4% or 4 to 5% drop is not so bad, given where it's where it has fallen in the past at that sort of level of demand. We also saw a fairly weak AMF demand, which hasn't been too bad of late, but it tanked. Yeah. So, sorry, wrong way. Butter was the shining commodity, the only one that really went up. And that's a pretty good-looking forward profile chart, even though it does dip.
Yeah, it's not bad, is it?
Yeah, where it's been. So, value buying has been occurring, largely to China, but other buyers have come in. And we can see it's though the relativity to Europe is interesting because Europe is still looking reasonably stable. It has weakened a little bit lately.
Yeah.
With the as the reality of COVID has sunk in, those European prices have softened. But the forward profile on GDT is a lot weaker. But that's the sort of relativity we'd expect.
But we could see them coming together a bit more in both directions.
Yeah. China held it together, of course.
Yes.
So the powder's still pretty strong in terms of that trend line as to the participation in percentage terms. So that's again a good story. We should be positive about that. Skim milk powder, there was again we saw this last time, pretty much a similar sort of effect. The narrowing of the premium between New Zealand, the premium New Zealand over European product narrowed again by nearly $100.
Yeah.
And the US probably wish they didn't show up this time because they had a fairly ordinary outcome.
It doesn't really show up there. But
it doesn't show up there because it plots every now and then. So there's a chart technicality, which I didn't get onto. But the US price ended up being not much above the spot non-fat dry milk CME price. So they wouldn't call that a good result.
No, perhaps not.
So, Jo, chart of the week, what have you come up with?
Well, it's a bit hard to avoid the US at the moment, rightly or wrongly, but I thought we'd have a look at the oil milk price, which has taken a bit of a dive in the last month. And just looking at that MPP milk margin, it's been very volatile, and it's forecast there to rebound but then to soften again. And so the big question is, what will that do to milk production, which we've forecast there to soften a little bit.
Yeah, we have, and I think it's we don't see the support for cow numbers to grow with that volatility and the outlook. Feed prices rising is putting a lot of pressure on that.
Sure.
Going forward, but that's probably if you rely on yield alone, that'll eventually let you down, and it'll grow a little slower.
Yeah.
But cows in the US are only being added where new plants are going, so that's
right.
To the western side of the country. So,
and once we're past the election, there'll perhaps be less support thrown at strategic parts of the country where farmers are. So it'll be interesting to see how that travels in the next little while.
There's already talk that there's already indication that the direct support for product buying will start to weaken, and they'll favour more snap type, coupon type approaches rather than direct product buying, which has been quite, caused a great deal of volatility. But we shall see.
Yeah.
Well, in what is a difficult day for the world, that's all from us. We'll be back sometime soon with another one of these little videos, and thanks for watching.